Hi, I'm Jennet Ingle, the 5 Minute Reedmaker. If you're watching this on YouTube, will you go ahead and click subscribe, and that way you'll never miss an episode. Now, today we're going to watch a reed repair shop, and I actually think that it's got a lot of value. The big issues with these reeds were leaking at the top, gapping at the top, and an extreme thinness in the tip, a lack of slope within the tip. And you'll see me work on this and correct it and really solve some major problems in these reeds. But you will also notice that the sound quality is not up to my normal standard for the first at least half of this video, at least about the first 16, 17 minutes. And I'm really sorry, I don't know why that happened and I don't know how to fix it, but it does get better. And I think that there's a lot of value to be drawn from the work that I did on these reeds, and so I'm going to release it anyway, and I hope that you can listen past my miking problems and enjoy. Thank you for sending these 3 reeds. I have to say, you've given me a lot of words in your note about how precisely they are differently bad for you, or differently unhelpful to you in some ways. And yet, interestingly, they all have really, really similar related problems. You talked about needing Teflon tape on the reeds, and these two of them did come with tape down by the thread, sealing them up. But I had to unwrap the tape to, assess what was going on. And I didn't actually perceive any leaks down by the thread at all. What I did perceive is that all 3 of them were quite gappy at the top of the reed, and maybe even into the heart area a little bit. And so I wonder if that gapping at the top is what caused you to feel like you had to put Teflon tape on down here. In all cases, like, it took me a little while to get them to soak to normalcy, but they did all soak to a point where they closed up relatively well at the top. So I feel like if I've got a gap at the top of the reed that will not close when I soak it, that is a fatal flaw. I don't know any way to fix that. But because they've soaked closed, I know I can go on and work on these a little bit further. And in terms of having those loose sides at the very top, this is such a common problem, and it's such a frustrating problem. And sometimes I wonder if it has to do with the gouge, but I observe from your notes that all 3 of these are off of my gouged cane, and I haven't been having any trouble with it, and most people haven't. So I'm taking that the table as an idea. So then I went to look at your wind specifically, because I feel like the wind at the very top of the wind is where some people can totally unknowingly cause leaks and gaps high up on the reed. And specifically, I'm looking at, like, this aqua one, for example. Seems like, as I'm following the structure of the tube up here, I see in these just top few winds just how tight it gets. And it's specifically the region of the reed that, like, the first few winds that you put on before you cross over and come down. And I think what's happening is that perhaps in your anxiety about, like, trying to get a perfect wind, or, perhaps just because of the way that you have been taught and the way that you're winding, you're pulling very, very tightly right at the top for those top 3 winds. And the tightness with which you're winding right at the throat is actually causing that cane to flare a little bit, to pivot. Pivot is not the right word, but it's like the thread at the very, very top of the tube here is acting as the pivot point and causing this part to flare. So I wonder if, as an immediate first step to improve your reed making, I don't want to say loose, ease off that top bit, or even once you've managed to make the reed seal, what if you were able to just relax and let a little bit more slack in there? I feel like this is a problem that is really self-perpetuating sometimes, because as soon as you start getting some loose sides up there, you get really cognizant of your winding. You're like, well, I gotta fix this. I've got to make a perfect wind. And then you pull even tighter. And like this one looks a little less dramatically like that to me. And indeed, this one was the least leaky at the top and the one that you didn't include Teflon tape on. But here again, as I just look at the structure, like I see you grabbing very, very tightly up here. It's not the tightest thing I've seen. It's not the worst offense. But my hypothesis is that that's what's keeping your reeds just a little bit gappy at the top and frustrating you, because I really don't perceive a leak down near the thread at all. So that's my first observation. And then my second observation, again, the same on all three reeds, is that I love this very steep, beautiful rooftop you've got going here, right? It's very clean and clear, and it's clear on both sides. The thing that concerns me is this region immediately sort of above the chimney of the rooftop. For me, that feels very, very thin, and I don't see that you are able actually to get the sides or the corners to be thinner than this area. And I'm going to show you a backlit view of these reeds. All three of them seem to have this same problem, where if I had to label the thinnest part of the tip, it would be this region immediately above the peak of the rooftop. And I think that might be where your greatest problem is. You described that you feel like you get the reeds to this point and you don't know how to go further, because if you try to thin the sides of the tip anymore, you tend to shred them or you wreck them. And I get it, because it's so, like, this aqua reed is definitely an example. It's so thin, I feel like I can almost read through this tip in the middle. Obviously, there's no way to make these sides any thinner. They're already practically gone. But there's still no actual slope in this tip, because it's sort of uniformly thin all the way across. And if anything, it's thinner in the center. So here's what I want to do. All of these reeds seem to have about the same problem. And I will play this one as an example, because it's the one in my hand. They crow a little bit low. And they play fine. Like, I'm not protecting that very much with my mouth. They play fine, but they're definitely a little bit wild and a little bit, like, I feel the discomfort that you must be feeling. They're all a little bit flat. You have to hold on to them to get them up to pitch. And what I'm wondering is this. If we dropped the rooftop just a little bit, if I dropped the rooftop just a little bit, and it is not actually my advice for you to place the rooftop below 65, but because you're already so thin in the middle of the tip, I don't know how to solve your problem otherwise. So what I'm going to do is lower your rooftop about 1 millimeter, just so I can build a little more structure into the center of the tip, and clip back and see if I can get you a little bit more a little bit more body in this reed. What I'm going to do is drop your rooftop about 1 millimeter in order to try to leave more structure in the middle of the tip, and to show you how I do that. So as I cut in here on the side, about 1 millimeter lower than you were doing, I'm letting my knife weight pretty dramatically toward the handle, toward this part, and I'm using my index finger to really direct the knife to exactly where I want it to be, which same thing. Really, I'm weighting my knife toward the tip. I'm cutting in strongly at the gutter and much less strongly higher up. Here I go again. so that even though I'm doing this in kind of one big stroke, um, you can see that I've cut in more strongly at the gutter than I have higher up. Not saying this is perfect. You are already paper thin up here, and I know I've shredded the corner a little bit, but the working the way it was, so we're going to just keep trying. Here's your other blade. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut in millimeter lower, do a strong cut in at the gutter, and an increasingly gradual cut in. Can you even see how thick my cut is here and how much thinner it is on this side? I hope you can see that. And then just clean up to the corner, and the same again on this side. Now, do I know this will work? No, I don't, and I'm especially suspicious because of the bad thing I did to the corner on this other blade. And I'm feeling the, as I try to crow it, I'm feeling that leak at the top again, because of course the reed is drying out as it sits on my plaque and as I talk. So I'm going to clip a tiny bit and re-soak and see if just restructuring the invisible shadow tip will help this. Re-soaking, give that a second and come back. All right, I'm going to try the same game with your navy one. Said that the red and blue one was the best, so I'm going to experiment with this one. This one definitely has some more resistance built in, partly because the tip is quite short and because you've left some lovely bulk. And this is also what you complained about. It's open, it's stuffy, and the response is hard. I think we can fix all of those things by doing the same trick. I'm just going to lower the rooftop maybe 1/2 mil. Look at how thin the middle of the tip is. And what I want to create for you is just a little bit of structure in this area. And I can't do it as we have it, right? Because it's so thin here, I can't get thinner on the side. So instead, I'm just going to lower it so that we build a little structure right there. That's my idea. Cutting in with the weight of my knife at the side. And again, it is not that I'm recommending you build your rooftops at 64. It's that I'm recommending that you build your rooftops with some visible smoke coming out of the chimney. When I describe the chimney, I mean some smoke coming out of the peak of the roof line. That's not where real chimneys live, but pretend for a moment that we're in 2nd grade. Here comes another one. I'm doing a very clean cut at the gutter and putting less weight on my knife toward the middle of the tip to build in that that structure. And I'll re-soak. Again, it has dropped the crow, but I also feel that looseness at the top, which again I suspect has to do with your wind. Tiny clip on this guy. I think he's ready to go. Little more. And now the crow has kind of come up. Okay, so here's your navy blue reed, which was too open and stuffy. It's still a little bit too open, and I want to deal with it next. But I don't know if you notice how much more controlled the sound seems to be. Let me revisit this aqua guy who has been soaking. I want to check him too. he's a little wild still, I'm going to clip. And I will admit that, remember how I belittled your leak down by the thread? It's like, nah, there's no leak there, but there absolutely is. I do feel some leakage down here on my left side, so I will this guy as I get him done. Now that's a very different than you had before. We are hurting for response in this reed, and I'm going to try to get to the sides and corners of the tip to try to improve that. It's possible that the damage we've got on the sides of the tip is not totally recoverable, and that we won't end up with a response in this reed. But do you hear how collective the sound is and how it's come up to pitch? It's a big difference from what you had before. It seems to be a big difference from what you had before. So as I look for response now that I've carefully built in a real steps and stairs roof line, right? It's like there's a roof and then it's covered with snow, sort of all the way along. So I'm just going to clean some of the snow down towards the gutter especially. I want to leave snow right up at the peak of the roof line. Can't remember where you're from exactly and if it snows where you are. But frankly, it's snowed everywhere this winter, hasn't it? So really what I'm trying to do is just clean off the snow that is lower down on the roof line, leave some at the top where the smoke might be coming out of the chimney. And again, I am not sure that I can solve this. We definitely had damage to this reed even before I started working on it at the sides of the tip. And then I did corner. So no promises, but oh, that crow is so much nicer. I actually don't even want to clip. Let me play it. And then if I replace the Teflon tape, that it's not leaking anymore. Okay, so I'm hoping that this feels like an improvement for you. This aqua one was struggling a little bit from the beginning, but I feel better about what we've done here. And the navy blue guy, remember how excited I was about him just a minute ago? Let's see what he's been doing. He's still very open, which is the next thing I want to do. But it's a ton of sound and it's got a really beautiful core, so I'm happy about all of that. It feels to me as I play it as though this reed is being held open strongly down back in the windows area. And I can see, wow, do you see the gapping up here? Same situation. I think this is still part of your wind. But I can feel the strength of the spine here, and like we love the spine. It's an important structural element, but if we were to allow ourselves, what I want to do is this area that you've smoothed, this area that you've smoothed so carefully right in here, I kind of want to cut there and there to really help dig out right below the heart. I think that just having a stronger distinction between the windows and the heart will help the opening of this reed to settle down. Now that probably won't have anything to do with the gapping that we're seeing at the top. That's a wind problem. But I'm going to do this and see if it closes the reed down a little bit and makes it more comfortable to play. So when I do this, I'm just going to follow your scrape, but right there, I'm going to go a little bit more aggressively downhill. And then when I get to the bottom of the heart, I'm going to stop. Basically, right exactly where I drew that pencil is where I let my knife dig just a bit. And because it would be a very bad thing to take off the rail right under the heart, which is something that happens to some people, I allow my knife to cross the center line instead of crossing the side line. So what ended up happening is that we've reduced your spine a little bit, and we've created a real contour right there at the bottom of the heart. This reed I like a ton. It feels like it's sitting up to pitch comfortably. I do have to hold on to it with my mouth a little bit because there's a little bit of danger up at the top with that gapping. I know that when it soaks, it will soak closed, but like you can't live like that, right? Having to dip it again in water every 5 seconds. Teflon tape probably won't help that. Won't help this down here, and you can't do anything with nail polish this high up on the reed. So I would say that this reed is probably not a survivor, but I hope that there's been some value in what we did to it and how much it improved over time. I still don't feel any leaks down here, so I'm not going to put tape back on. And I'm sure that it will be gapping when it gets back to you, but you'll soak it and see what I did and see if that feels good to you. Okay, our last reed is this orange and, yellow and red one. And you had mentioned that you liked it. I liked it too. Let's just play it. You are correct that the crow is flat. That the response is pretty good, and that this is clearly by far the best of these reeds. For me, it's also quite open, but I'm going to leave that opening, unless I decide not to in a minute, because you indicated that you were very comfortable with the way this reed feels. But I think, and this is the one that holds the most tightly at the top of the reed as well. So, and as I look at it now, look at this in the light, you can see that there's such a strong cut right there that gets thicker again further out. And that thinness actually goes right to the middle of the reed. And it's the case over here too. So, I mean, not to be repetitive, but I want to do the exact same thing. I want to slightly lower the rooftop in order to allow some structure. In order to allow some structure right here in the center. And then if it feels called for, I might just take a little tiny bit below the heart to help the opening. But that's all I'm doing. Here we go. 0.5 millimeter lower with my focus at the side. Okay, one more. This one, I feel like the area we really need to deal with is this, where you've cut so heavily right there. I'm going to drop the rooftop quite a bit. Cutting in at the side, and then I'm going to go ahead and like pet the kitty in an upward direction north of your thin place. Trying to work that out. Same over here. And it's almost as though after you made the damage on the left side, you sort of shied away from the right, so I actually feel like this was the thickest part of the tip. Dropped the crow, and your crow was already low, but because your tip was so short and skinny, like it didn't feel safe to clip, did it? Now I hope it feels safer to clip. Little more. I feel like we could still have a little bit more resistance in there, and I would like it, but I don't, I hesitate to change this reed too much more. It's crowing a C, it's playing nicely. I think I will leave it for you. But the place I would go for that greater resistance, I don't want to clip it again because it's crowing a C, but if I dig out behind the heart, I think that will strengthen the heart, cause the whole thing to, and cause me to be able to go back into the tip and scrape even a little bit more. Scraping in the windows will strengthen the heart and the tip to where I can bring them back down. Let me just do it a little bit. Just a little to demonstrate. Here I am, and I'm not going to go as aggressively as I did with your navy reed, but I am going to just work a little bit to make a stop behind the heart. It's funny, your scraping actually is so smooth and pretty on this that it's almost hard for my knife to get a grip. Like right there, I want a catch, and your scrape is so smooth I almost can't have it. But doing that dropped the crow a little. Maybe I'm just going to give a tiny clip right now. Tiny. So little, just an eyelash. Half an eyelash. Okay, so to me, all three of these reeds feel much better now, and I did basically the same thing to all three. I think your most fundamental issue in these reeds is the extreme thinness right above the heart, which and right above the peak of the rooftop especially, which I think happens when you allow your knife to incur at the center of the reed. When I'm scraping at the tip, I'm always oriented to the right side or to the left side. I never let my knife scrape in the middle with the same strength that it scrapes on the edges. I allow my knife to cross the center line because that's how wood ultimately comes off, but I do not scrape in the center. And a little bit I feel like the tip of your knife when you're on the right and the heel of your knife when you're on the left is incurring, is hurting the middle of the reed. In I think all three cases, at least in two of the cases, I went to your windows a little bit to settle down the opening of the reed. Your windows were very pristine, but when I allowed there to be a good catch behind the heart, it settled the opening down. And all three of these reeds had some gapping issues at the very top. You can still see it in you can still see it in the ones that are drier, the navy and the aqua ones. And I hypothesize that that's a winding problem. And if you'll just let yourself relax the tiniest bit in just those upper three real crucial winds, I think that problem will settle down for you too. Thank you so much for watching. This has been a Reed Repair Shop